see within my 2D pattern window what is the dimensions of things. And then afterwards, just press A, select the panel here, and then just play around here with the size here, just manually scale it up, as you can see. So all these ways work really to create these different panels, depending on how exact you want to be here. Just that sometimes I just like to tweak things directly instead of inputting actual exact measurements. But it doesn't really matter. You can create this in whichever way that you want, really. And then here, so we're talking about 50 centimeters or so for the length of the sleeve. So there you go. That's our rectangle of fabric there. And then we will attach this to the arrangement points on the avatar. Now, if you haven't seen the other classes on Mars Designer that we have on the website, the concept of arrangement point might be new to you. And arrangement points are simply helper points, if you will, that are created around any particular avatar that you have within Mars Designer to help you place garment panels easier there, and especially to wrap those particular garment panels around the silhouette of the body that you are working around there. So to show the arrangement points on an avatar, then you can press Shift F to expose them. And these are all these blue dots that you see within our 3D pattern window are all of the arrangement points that we have. So with this particular rectangle of fabric that is selected, I will then simply click on the arrangement point that is right here. So deep within the elbow, I will click on the one that is right here. And what that's going to do is that it will simply snap and also, as you can see, kind of roll around this particular panel of fabric around the particular arm that we have here. It just so happens though that this has been rotated 90 degrees because as you can see right now, we definitely don't have the proper length here for the sleeve. So this panel has actually been rotated in an orientation that is not what we want it to be. So here on the right, within our hotkey list, here I'll just switch this back over to the properties editor. And with this panel of fabric that is still selected, we can scroll down here and go where it says arrangement point right here. And in there, you can see what is the arrangement point that we have clicked on. So on which arrangement point is this particular panel of fabric connected to? And where it says here position X, Y, we can actually play around with the position, as you can see. And this kind of rotates here the panel of fabric around the arm. This one here will move it up and down. And the orientation in this particular case is the one that I want here. So it says 180 degrees. Let me just set this to 90 degrees, which will actually rotate. In fact, if I actually play around with this, you can see what actually happens there. So it's just rotating around the panel here. And so 90 degrees is what we want here. And finally, the offset that we have is kind of like how offsetted off of the body it is. So it is effectively pushing the panel of fabric further and further away from the body or closer to the body, depending on the value that we input in here. So this feels all really tight. I'm even wondering if I haven't forgotten one of the measurements here that we had. So we were talking here about 32 centimeters. This does seem overly tight now that I look at it, although this offset could be a little bit little bit higher, perhaps. And let me play with the position Y actually, just to slide this down the arm a little bit there. But yeah, this seems overly tight as a sleeve, right? If we compare it to the size of the arm side, which kind of makes me wonder if I haven't actually forgotten a measurement somewhere, or if I have not measured things properly here. So let me actually just check here the size here. So 12 centimeters for this particular segment. This one here is about 8 centimeters or so. This one is 13. And finally, just this one here that we need. So that's 32 centimeters yet again. So that should be correct, even though that kind of looks a little bit tight when we look at the sleeve here. But let's just continue to work on this, and then we'll see if there's anything that I am doing here that is extremely wrong and kind of guiding us off track here. But I don't think so. I mean, I am trusting the measurements that I'm seeing here, and this tells me that this should be 32 centimeters. So let's just roll with this and see where this actually takes us. So the next thing that I want to do is to, before we do actually add any kind of seam to connect the sleeve to the rest of the body, let me also just press Shift F here to get out of arrangement point mode here. The other thing that I want to do is just to match here the actual shape of the sleeves here, because you can sort of imagine if I actually attach the sleeve that I have here to the torso, this will start to stretch in all sorts of very ugly ways. So that isn't very good right now. So we want to just tweak the shape here of this particular segment that is right here until it actually has a shape that gets as close as possible to the body shape. So to do that, a few things I'm going to do here. First of all, we're going to freeze every panel that we have within the scene other than for the sleeves so that they don't actually shift around or continue to simulate there. So while I'm selecting all of the panels here that we have within our 2D pattern window, and let me just press Shift Z to disable the measurements. We're going to press Control K afterward just to freeze everything. And so this makes it so that whatever happens when I simulate here, no matter what happens to the sleeves, you'll see that the panels of cloth that are over the torso will never move. So that's what freezing does here. And not only will I do that, okay, but I will also disable the gravity within the scene so that when I do simulate, the sleeve does not actually fall down the arm the way that it is doing it right now. So this will allow me just to tweak the shape of the sleeve and kind of resimulate it and tweak it until we get as close as we can get to the shape of the arm side here without having to deal with the sleeve continuously falling down the character there. So to disable the gravity, pretty simple. On the top right here within this little box that is right here, we'll click on the little drop down menu that is right here. So right now this is set to fabric. And we'll just, from the drop down menu here, we'll simply select the scene browser. Now there might be a better way to do this now with the Mars Designer. I'm not actually sure, but this is the way that I've always done it to disable the gravity within the scene. So go to the scene browser and then scroll down where it says environment here. And within simulation properties, just click on that. And where it says gravity afterward here at minus 9800, let's just set that here to 0. And that will effectively disable the gravity in the scene, meaning that when I do simulate here once again, you can see that my sleeve now is kind of floating as if it was in space. Of course, it is opening itself because it tries to go back to its original 2D arrangement there. It does not keep the actual curvature that was that is the result of the of the arrangement point. But to make sure that we deal with that, of course, we can just seam here the underside of the sleeve. One thing we haven't really talked about, but in this particular case, this particular seam is placed where I want it to be, of course. But if I actually select the panel again, since we have played with the offset, we've played with the orientation in this particular panel. If we play here with the position X, you'll see that we can actually rotate the panel around. So we could actually place the seam wherever we want. If we want to have a back seam on the sleeve as opposed to an underside seam, I can do that easily by just playing around with the position X there. But regardless, I actually wanted to keep the seam right under the arm. So I'm just going to rotate it here once again and keep the seam right here. Ideally too, it's very common, I think, for jackets to see the side seam that we have on the torso and the seam of the sleeve to be both at the exact same height. So we might have to actually move this seam a little bit further back. So we might have to do that, but for now, let's just continue with this and we'll see where this takes us and if that becomes necessary later on or not. Okay, so let's create our seam here once again. And I'm not sure that's proper here. Oh yeah, here we go, just like that. The consequence of which, and because I have disabled the gravity within the scene, when I do simulate, you can see that my sleeve will nicely close itself, but it's not going to actually move. It's not going to slide down the arm. So it makes tweaking its shape here a lot better there. And I'm still concerned, by the way, about these particular dimensions. I still feel as if there's something going on here that needs to be addressed. And so troubleshooting 101, because there is definitely here something that does not make sense to me. And it's good that we're actually encountering this in the context of a class, because then we can actually talk about how to solve this here. We look at the garment right now and the stretch map, and there really doesn't seem to be that much stretching going on, but there's a little bit of stretching, okay? Like we can see, because this is actually blue as opposed to be completely white, the way that we actually have it on the sleeve right now. Like, in fact, we don't even have any stretching on the sleeve here at all. You can see when I actually move the sleeve around, the kind of stretch overlay seems to appear a little bit and then disappear. So there's no stretching on the arm right now, but there's actually a little bit of stretching going on over the garment. In fact, there is so much stretching in here we can, if we kind of match the color here, so this kind of blue sort of cyan color that kind of goes here towards the green a little bit actually gives us here a stretching of about 105 to 108, which I know it's kind of hard to see. Maybe if I move this particular graphic here over the torso, you can actually see these values here a little bit better. So 105, 108. So there actually is a little bit of stretching in here. It's just that it's so low that it doesn't seem to be much of a problem. But now that we're actually trying to add the sleeve and connect the sleeve to it, I think that this actually becomes very, very obvious that there is something here that is going on. In fact, if I select these particular panels here, I think this might be new. I'm not used to seeing the actual stretch amount kind of appear on top of a selected panel, but that's what we have here. So we can see that all these are actually stretched a little bit here. So 104%, 104, 102. In fact, where I'm clicking here seems to actually change. So wherever I'm clicking here actually seems to tell us what is the stretching amount at that particular zone here. You can see here around the armpit, in fact, we have about 107% stretching. That's a lot, okay? Like I would not expect there to be any kind of stretching. So I think that perhaps this is my own newbie mistake that I'm doing right now. Okay, but it's actually very, very bad to have stretching like this that is built into the garment there. So of course, we always want to think about what kind of material this is supposed to be. So, like right now, this particular shirt slash coat garment that we are building would look great if this was, let's say, some type of active wear. Like something that has a little bit of spandex in there, like some type of exercise gym clothes that you kind of expect to have some stretching that is kind of built in there. This would look great for that here. And in that context, this is great. If that's what we are building, this is great. But because we're actually building a coat here made out of, I haven't really made a choice because we're just kind of freestyling this, of course. I haven't really made a choice as to what kind of material this will be. But I don't expect it to be a material that stretches that much. Meaning that if we wind up doing, let's say, a leather coat, leather doesn't, I mean, leather does stretch, of course, with time. If you wear leather and you can continuously wear it in a way that it is tight somehow, it will definitely stretch with time, but it doesn't stretch that much, right? It's not like a pair of spandex tank top or shorts or something that you kind of expect to really, really stretch quite a lot when you wear it, right? So leather stretches with time, but you don't necessarily expect it to stretch when you put it on necessarily. And same thing with anything that is kind of made with perhaps more natural fibers like cotton, flax, wool. I mean, the wool can stretch, and so can cotton, of course, depending on the type of weave that is there. So anything that is knit will typically stretch, even if the basic material itself, such as cotton, does not stretch itself. The way that something is knit does impart some type of stretchiness to the fabric. I'm going deep down the rabbit hole here with you, but I think it's good to think about these things, okay? Like, I think that's the moral of the story here. But anyway, most outer shells that we could wear, coats, are not typically stretchy. And that's kind of what I want to be going for with this particular character, actually. So I haven't made a choice as to what is the material, but I have made the choice that this should not be a stretchy material. Which means that actually, like as nicely as this fits right now, and I will fully admit that part of why this fits so well right now is my own perhaps obsessive nature when it comes to creating nicely fitted clothes. But this is perhaps an example of me actually pushing things a little bit too far to the point that now this is actually not proper for the type of garment that I want to build there. And so we actually have to solve this. We'll have to solve this before we connect the sleeve, because the sleeve right now will essentially have the same thing will happen to the sleeve as what is happening on the torso there. We'll have a little bit of stretching that is kind of happening within the sleeves. If I was to connect the sleeves to the body right now, it would not look all that good. And this is not appropriate for the type of fabric and the type of garment that I want to build. So we have to fix that. Another thing, okay, if we want to really kind of make sure that we know exactly how wide the arm size should be, but also have it to be still in contact with the body, but not necessarily be stretched by the body. Another thing that we could do, of course, is just to measure what is the circumference here around the shoulder there, just to know what kind of value we should be expecting for the opening to the arm side without having any kind of stretching happening there. So the way that we can do that is using those particular measures that I've been talking about here. believe a surface tape measure is probably the one that we want to use. So let's go ahead and use that here. What this allows us to do is just to, as you can see, just do a series of points that goes all the way around the avatar, which allows us to see what is the measurement there for any particular circumference or distance or shape that we could want to try and measure there. So I'm just going to go all the way around the arm. And let's connect this to the beginning. And so the measurement there for this particular measurement that I have created using the surface tape measure actually gives us a size here of 43.7 centimeters. Whereas our garment, as we have talked about, actually has right now about 32 centimeters right now. So there's actually quite a lot of stretching that is built in there. I'm not sure what's the difference between 32 to 43. That's somewhere about the order of what, 25%, maybe even 30%, which is actually quite a lot of stretching when you actually really think about it, right? Point being that if I want my sleeve to connect where this particular measurement is, and we do not want to have any kind of stretching in there by default, or just a very, very minimal amount of it, then it means that my sleeve needs to be about 43 centimeters, first of all. And second of all, it means that the rest of my garment also has to um, be about 43 centimeters if we select all of these edges here that go all the way around the arm side. Actually, which is what I have right now. Okay, another curveball. I'm so confused. I mean, so everything I've said so far, I think, is an interesting way to troubleshoot things. But I am so confused because now I'm actually getting a measurement here of 45 centimeters when I select all of these, which again makes sense to me because 32 centimeters, if we needed for it to be around 45, would be a amount of stretching that was about 30%, which is not equal to what we were actually getting there. If we actually, when we were looking at our stretch map here, so we get here a stretching of about 4% here, right? So from 32 to 43, that would be somewhere about 30% or so. And so that did not make any sense to me. And so actually, when I take these measurements again, yes, there's actually a bug within Mars Designer. Depending on which of these seams I'm actually clicking on somehow, or some of these edges I'm actually clicking on. I don't understand why, but now we're actually getting with the exact same edges that are selected here, the exact same segments. Now we're getting 45. This is also much closer to the measurement that we have simply added to the avatar there. Um, yeah, I think this has to be a bug of Mars Designer. The fact that it was giving us 32 centimeters before, and I've actually just checked the recording that I have just done here to make sure that I did indeed have the proper ones selected, the proper segments selected, and I did, and it gave us a measurement of 32 centimeters, if you remember previously. This is typically the kind of thing that would actually cut out of the video and I would just restart, but we've talked about troubleshooting, I think, in a way that is kind of interesting. So I will actually keep this within the class, simply because now you know where to find the measurements and how to go about actually measuring things very precisely if you want to know what is the circumference of a particular place on the body and you want to create something that nicely fits there. Anyway, so we're keeping all of that. But what I have said about minimizing the stretching is very true. I actually don't want to have any stretching on this. particular garment there, which means that yes, I do need to address this regardless. Okay. First of all, this sleeve should be 45 centimeters. So first of all, that we know is definitely true. So I could actually go ahead here, take my rectangle, make it about 45 centimeters tall, about this here. And actually, if I just play around just for the sake of it, with the arrangement points, let me actually resimulate. We still have the gravity here that has been turned off within the scene. And actually, I'll just do Control F just to reset the 3D arrangement of this particular piece of fabric. And then let's play around here with the offset so that we once again get, we don't have an overlap that is built into the sleeve here by default. In terms of circumference now for the sleeve, this makes a lot more sense to me. Of course, we want to taper the sleeve so that where the sleeve meets the hand, it will not be as wide as this. Of course, that is something that we'll have to do. But at least for the part of the sleeve that connects to the arm side, now this makes a lot more sense to me in terms of width, right? This, or in terms of circumference, this matches nicely here. So yeah, where did this leave us then? Well, I think I still want to make the garment slightly bigger than what we have to address what I have just said about the fact that I don't want to have any stretching within this particular torso here. And we have a little bit of stretching right now. And I actually think that I actually really need to get rid of that to begin with. So let's put the sleeve on hold just for a second and let's talk about how we can actually make this particular garment here just a little bit bigger so that we get rid of all of the stretching that we currently have. So what can we do to make this garment bigger then? So we want to make it, yeah, about 3 to 4% bigger, essentially. That's kind of where we want to wind up, right? So how can we actually scale all of this up and yet keep the fit, keep the placement of the panels over the body there? There's a few different ways that we can scale up and down garments, okay? Because what we have to do here is a change that will be global to the whole garment and is not a huge change, and we don't have to change, let's say, the overall proportions because we're keeping the proportions of the body that we currently have. We can probably keep this relatively simple and just scale everything up by about 4%, 4 to 5%. That will probably work quite well, and that's what we will do. But if you are in a position where you actually need to change the size of a garment and you have to do much, much bigger tweaks to the size of the garment and perhaps even fit a garment to a different character, so different proportions entirely, you also have options within Marvel's Designer to do that. I won't cover how to do this in the context of this particular class, just for sake of keeping this class relatively contained to a particular topic. But what you need is a function called fitting suit, and you can actually find the buttons for that. Once again, it kind of keeps on changing between the different versions of Mars Designer, but it's right here. So create fitting suit and then retarget draping. So if we don't have any content related to that on outgang.studio, I will make sure to add some of that within the future. It's not that complicated, and you can probably also already find tutorials on how to use a fitting suit, either on Mars Designer's YouTube page or elsewhere on YouTube. And we will eventually add content to outgang.studio that is also related to that. But so this is the answer to the question of how do I change the actual fit of a garment to fit a different character or very different proportions. This asks you to have two different avatars, one that is the original one on which a garment has been created, and one that will be the avatar after the body changes that you are looking to do there. So, and there's different ways to go about reshaping the size of a particular avatar. One thing you could do, of course, is to change the avatar that you already have within the scene. If what you're looking to do are changes that are not that complicated, we could actually go within avatar, as in within the menu here, and we could go within the avatar editor. And in here, we can actually tweak the different body proportions that we have here. Where it says here avatar size, we can actually change some of these values here. So I'm not sure here if I just do a very quick change just to show you here. So neck, let's say neck base circumference here, we have a value of about 36 centimeters. If I say, I don't know, 40 centimeters, you can see that it's actually going to change the size of the avatar itself. So I won't say more about that within this particular class, just for the sake of keeping this class relatively contained. But we will cover this in a future class on Agenda Studio to make sure that you have the information as to how to go about using this. So, as I've said, in this particular context, this should be relatively simple because we just want to scale everything up and we're not actually changing the proportions of the avatar itself. We can very likely just scale this up by about 5% or so, and this should give us the exact fit that we are looking for. Since I'm looking to more or less scale everything up by the same amount there. So let's go ahead and do that here. I'm just going to take everything here within our 2D pattern window. And I'm just going to scale this up here, and I'm going to eyeball this really, but 5% really isn't that much of a difference. Of course, if we wanted to be extremely precise with this, we could start by, let's say, taking a particular segment somewhere, so 7.8. So 5% of that, perhaps we have an edge somewhere whose value would be a little bit easier to judge here. Okay, so this particular edge here is 11 centimeters exactly. So plus 5% would be 5 times 11, that's 55. So 11.55 centimeters if we want to scale this up by 5% exactly here. So I'm just going to take everything. Press A here, select everything that I have within our 2D pattern window, other than the sleeve, of course. And let's just scale everything up. And let's see afterwards. So this particular segment now is 11.78. So that was a little bit too much. Let's just scale this down here just slightly here. And 11.68. That's probably good enough. It's a little bit more than 5%, but I think that should probably be fine. Let me freeze the sleeve and let's just resimulate everything. Oh, and let's turn on gravity once again within the scene. This is going to help the garment fit better to the character, of course. So within our scene browser here, simulation properties, gravity, let's set this to minus 9800. And resimulate. And let's just fix whatever is happening here. Yanking on stuff is often my preferred way of fixing something that is not properly fitted over the character there. Hopefully this is enough. Else we can always reset arrangement for some or all of these garment pieces, which we might have because there's a twist here that, oh no, okay, there we go. That wasn't too hard to get rid of. But yeah, worst case scenario, I could have taken all of these different panels, press Control F to reset arrangement, which does ask us to resimulate a lot of stuff from the beginning, but sometimes that's kind of what you need to do, or perhaps just do this on one or two of these panels here. So I could have reset arrangement on this panel here and then this panel here. Take this one here, move it towards the back. Take this one here, move it towards the front. Freeze everything else. So freeze these panels here on the side. Resimulate like that. See, that would have also allowed us to get rid of this kind of twist that was happening there. So if I unfreeze everything, so we still have a little bit of stretching around the breasts, but we don't have much stretching on the back here. There's a little bit of it around the shoulders, which I'm fine with because we'll always have some stretching here because gravity is pulling down on the fabric. The fabric is being pulled down around the shoulders. The gravity is pulling on the fabric. There's weight there. Of course, that will always create stretching over the shoulders. That's kind of expected. So there's not really anything else that needs, anything there needs to be addressed. And the overall fit is actually better. So we are starting to get a few folds here, which I like. I know I can get obsessive over removing folds, but having a few folds is obviously very natural, right? So it's not necessarily a problem that we have these. And so I think the fit is actually overall a lot better there. I think it's already a lot more natural. So yeah, so this wasn't that complicated of a change. But like I said, we can create a fitting suit and play around with avatar proportions if ever we are in a situation that we need to make these bigger proportional changes to an avatar and to the garment. And we will cover that in a future class at some point. But for now, this is all that we need. Okay. So let's see if we still have that bug, by the way, when I select these particular segments here. Yeah, see, I still have that bug. Okay, so we're back here at having 34.77 centimeters for some reason. So yeah, so that bug is still there. So make sure to have a lot of skepticism when you actually select a bunch of segments and look at the overall length that it gives you here, because that bug is back here. We're back here at having a value here of 34 centimeters, which of course 13 plus 12 plus 8 plus 14 does not give us 34. So it's interesting to know why this is happening. This feels like something that should be reported to the Mars designer team. Might have something to do actually with selecting these handles here. If I select the segment here, segment there, we have the proper values. But if I actually click on this little Bezier handle that is here, or if I click on this segment in a way that selects the Bezier handle at the same time, yeah, for some reason you can see that the measurement is not coming across there. So, okay. Yeah, I guess I kind of understand where the bug is coming from, but it's this is definitely a bug regardless. Okay, so 47.76 centimeters. That's how wide we want the sleeve to be. So I'm happy with that. Let's continue scaling this up then. We can unfreeze our sleeve. So it's 47 point, I don't quite remember, but 0.5 should be good. And let's do the same thing that we have done where we disable the gravity within the scene. And now if I simulate, my sleeve will now float and the rest of the garment will float as well. Let me freeze everything other than the sleeves. And now we can play around with the opening here of the sleeve where it connects with the arm side and make sure that that has the proper shape. So the way we're going to do that really is we're going to continue to use our style line editing tools. In this particular case here, so let me use the edit style line button right here. Let me once again detach this particular menu. I'll also get rid of the library here. We don't need that here. Select edit style line, and you'll see here I won't be able to really do the best changes here. If I take this particular edge and I kind of move it like this actually kind of gives us something that's actually kind of not too bad. but we will likely have to add a bunch of points to the segment here of the sleeve that connects to the arm side so that we can get the proper shape going on there. So let me just go ahead and do that. I can get out here of style line editing, resimulate this just to let this fall down a little bit so that it's in a bit more of a natural position. But you can see that the curve here, we're getting here a very awkward curve. So we definitely have to add a few points to this here. So let me just add a point here to the center line of the segment that connects to the arm side. Also rotate this around on the other side so that I can kind of see a little bit better where this will actually connect to the torso. Perhaps move these segments, move these panels over, disable the measurements. And let's continue to tweak this here. So let's see how far we can push this using the style and editing feature. So once again, I'm just shaping this until I'm getting a nice straight curve or straight line, I suppose, within the 3D window. The consequence, though, is that sometimes this sort of happens. It just creates this kind of angularity here to the panels as opposed to give us what we kind of expect to create a bit of a wave shape or a sin wave shape. So yeah, I guess we've reached the limit of what we can do with these style and editing tools. I guess we'll have to go and tweak this manually here. So let me press Z, go within our 2D pattern window and just tweak these curves manually. And so I'm kind of looking to create some kind of wave shape here. And as I'm doing that, you can see within the 3D pattern window, starting to get something that is more and more straight here. So this is looking pretty good. Maybe I can actually tweak this a little bit using the style and editing feature. And that's a problem. So yeah, I guess we've reached the limit of what we'll be able to do with these style and editing tools. There's a slight curve here that could be nice to try and address. Let me see if I play around with these handles if we're able to control for that. Yeah, just like so. That looks pretty good to me. Straight in the front, straight in the back. I'm pretty happy with this. We're not quite matching though the same angle. You can see the angle of the arm side on the torso is not as steep. So using our styling editing feature, let's just move this point here a little bit further towards the top. Okay, let's sew everything together. Perhaps you can already actually taper a little bit the opening here for the wrist. There too, I'm happy just eyeballing this. But we could do the same trick that we have done with the measurements here, where we, in this particular case, use a basic circumference measure, go all the way around the wrist here to see what is the exact size here of the opening for the sleeve that we need, at least if we want it to be skin tight, of course, which I don't necessarily want. But we can see here, so 15 centimeters or so would be the lowest limit that we could really go for the width here of the sleeve. But I'm happy to try to just eyeball this here a little bit. So let's use our scale style line and let's scale down this particular opening here until we get something that is a lot closer to what we expect to have. About like this or so. So we have here finally a segment of about 20 centimeters, just a little bit under that. I'm happy with that. We'll have to tweak the shape of this, of course, but we can go with this for now. Let's simulate once again. Make sure that this starts to rest a little bit more nicely around the arm. Yeah, that's definitely too narrow, actually. Let me make the opening here of the sleeves a little bit bigger so that she can actually move her arm in and out of the sleeves. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's go for about 24 centimeters, perhaps, or so. That should be good enough for now. Let's turn gravity back on within the scene and let's sew everything up together. So simulation properties here, gravity minus 9800. And so for the sewing, what we're going to do is that we're going to create an M to N segment sewing. So within our 3D pattern window then, in fact, let me just unfreeze everything as well. Okay, Shift N. So segment 1, segment 2. For the sleeve portion, press Enter, and then select the same or the corresponding segments in the same order over the panels for the torso. Press Enter, and that should be good enough. So let's take our sleeve, and then within our 2D pattern window, let's right-click on our sleeve panel, and let's do a clone pattern with linked editing, symmetric pattern with sewing. And let's simulate. Okay, so there's one thing that I haven't done properly. First of all, I'm quite interested to figure out why is it that there's all this stretching here, but that could be something to do with these seams that have been created. Interesting, but we can put that on the back burner for now, and we'll address this later. But there is one critical thing that I have not done that I should have done with the sleeve, which is that, as you remember, we've talked about the opening of the arm side here being about 47 centimeters. And we had created a rectangle that had that particular size to it. Now, the problem, okay, that we are encountering here is that we do not have 47 centimeters anymore for the segments that are on the sleeve that connect to the arm side because we have added this wave to it, right? And so because of that, now this particular segment, or these two segments rather, because there are two of them, are not 47 centimeters anymore because of the shape that we have built in there. So if I select the two of these now we have actually 52 centimeters, which means that the whole sleeve actually needs to be scaled down so that we have 47 centimeters, 47.5 centimeters, but accounting for the kind of wave that we have just built in here. So let's select our panel here, and we're just going to smush it here vertically, just like so. And let's do that until we have 47.5 centimeters. So I need to smush it just a little bit more than this. 47.57. That's good enough for me. Let's resimulate. And there you go. Now the sleeve fits a lot better. Okay, so what can we draw from this? What can we observe so far in terms of fit? I really like the fit around the torso. I like that there is, once again, a little bit of looseness that is kind of built in there. Since this will be a coat, this makes a ton of sense to me. The thing that is bothering me, though, for now, is that I think that the sleeve actually wound up being a little bit too wide. Once again, so of course, this is all a question of design. If you're making something where you want the sleeves to be a little bit loose, then this is pretty much what you would expect there. But I actually kind of don't want that. I want a sleeve that's going to be a little bit tighter here. So I'm starting to think that we should actually compress the arm side a little bit more closer to the body here. Especially once we start to add gravity in there, you can see how now this is actually starting to sag quite a lot. And another thing I could actually do is, since I know that I don't necessarily want to have a lot of stretching within this particular garment, I could actually go ahead and actually reduce the amount of stretchiness that is already built into the fabric to begin with, because we're using the default properties for the fabric in this particular case, and the default fabric of Mars Designer does have some stretching that is built in, which is very obvious to us simply by looking at a garment that we have here. And especially here, if I actually click here over the shoulders, like the gravity here is actually giving us quite a lot of stretching here. So 113%. That's too high for me. So we want to remove some of the sagginess here that is under the armpit. And we'll probably have to tighten up here the pattern around the armpit a little bit. But before I do that, I think it would be a good idea to already kind of start to move towards a fabric type for this particular garment that is closer to what we expect it to be in the end. As I said, I haven't made a decision as to what kind of fabric I want this to be in the end. But I know that I don't want to be a fabric that has a lot of stretchiness built in there. So we can already at least control for that within our properties, our fabric properties. So let's go ahead and do that together. Within our scene browser, we're going to go back here within fabric. And when I click here on the fabric, which is a default fabric that is applied to everything here, we can go within physical property at the bottom here, and we can actually tweak these particular settings. Now, of course, if I go to preset here, okay, we have on the little drop down menu that is right here, there are a lot of different presets that come with Marvelous Designer. A lot of different presets that are very, very useful in different cases. And if you don't know what does what or what kind of fabric some of these are, can be very time consuming and confusing to try to just find the actual type of fabric that you want to use. If you already know the exact material that you want to use over something, then it's great to just pick it out of the list. But in my particular case here, I don't know right now what I want, but I know that I want something that has a little bit less stretching. So the other thing that I could do instead of just trying to hunt for the perfect preset here, the other thing I could do is just to instead go within the actual physical properties themselves. So where it clicks, where it says preset here, I'm just gonna open this particular drop down menu that is right here. And instead, I could actually just play around with these values here. That could actually be another way that I could actually do it, right? So these are the default properties from Marvelous Designer that we have. And so we can actually start to play around with these. Now, my goal is not to explain how all of these work in the context of a class, and at least not this particular class. But it's good to know at the very least that playing around with these particular values will obviously give you some cloth that will react in different ways. And the ones that I am particularly interested in this particular case is everything that is called stretch, because that's what I want to reduce. I want to reduce the stretchiness of the fabric so that the fabric stretches less. One thing I could do, of course, is look for a preset whose stretching values are closer to what I want them to be. Or I could also just tweak these values myself. So that's what we're going to do here. We're actually going to tweak these values ourselves. And the thing that you need to know, okay, about these values here, or at least most of these, not necessarily all of these, but most of these here. So the ones that are called stretch, shear, and bending. What you need to know about these is that this particular value here, so 27, does not mean that the fabric will stretch to 27%, or that if I increase this particular slider somehow, I will make the fabric stretch more. That's not how it actually works, surprisingly and very counterintuitively. These values do not represent how much the fabric will stretch, but rather it represents how stiff is the fabric to stretchiness, meaning that as you increase these stretch values, your fabric will have a tendency to stretch less, not more. And you can actually do that very easily, interactively here. If I just go within simulation mode right here, and let me just press Alt 2 here to go back within solid mode. You'll see that as I increase these values, our fabric will actually stretch less as opposed to stretch more. So this is stiffness. And as you can see, as I increase these values, in fact, as I play around with these sliders, let's say if I put them all the way down to 0, you can look how now baggy and how much the cloth starts to sag down, right? So these values are inverted, if you will. So let me increase these values here, stretch both weft and for the warp. So let's say, yeah, somewhere around 78 perhaps is good. This, as you can see, already gives us something that is a lot stiffer, which is what we expect it to be. But the other values that are important actually is the shear values. So shear values and stretch values are all the same thing, okay? Stretch weft means how much stretching there is on the horizontal axis. Stretch warp, how much stretching there is on the vertical axis. Now, this gets a little bit more complicated than this because that is based on the original orientation of these fabric panels and not the orientation that they currently have within Marvel's Designer. And if that does not make sense to you, one thing you can do actually is go here within edit texture and you can actually see what is the orientation of the panels here. And you can even just rotate this around if you wanted to change what is the orientation of the weft and the warp. Anyway, point being that we can, as you can see, control the amount of stretchiness over the weft and the warp independently. So some type of weaves can employ different types of fibers on the weft and the warp axis. So that would be a way to do it. But the other ones that are important to know is the shear values. Shearing simply means the amount of stretching that is on the bias, and the bias being the diagonal axis of a fabric. So in this particular case here, I have stretch, weft, and warp relatively high, or stiffness to stretching that are relatively high, but the shear is very low. So it means that the fabric can stretch a lot diagonally, but it cannot stretch a lot horizontally or vertically, which is very strange, which is very likely why we are getting all this kind of weird stuff happening on the back there. So I want to increase the shear values. If I want to keep my life simple and I want some fabric that is more resistant to stretching, it's not enough to play around with these two values here. You also have to increase the shear values. So let me put the shear values at about the same values that we have. And this accounts for stretching both on the X, the Y, and on the diagonals. Okay. This might be now a little bit too resistant to stretching. So we kind of want to find the sweet spot here. So this was about 27 before. Let me actually reduce these values here. Maybe go around 65, maybe perhaps 60. Let's try that as a blanket value and see the kind of result that we get out of that. One thing I perhaps want to do as well, though, is to increase also the stiffness to bending, because now these values are also very, very low, which means that the fabric bends easily. But it does not stretch easily, but it bends easily, and so which is very likely the result why the reason why we're getting all these folds here that are sort of happening everywhere over the fabric there. In fact, also just for the sake of it, let me reduce the particle distance so that we can see a little bit better what is happening here. Let me set the particle distance to 10, which has the consequence, of course, of giving us more resolution for our folds. So we can see the kind of result that we're getting here. It's not very pretty right now. And we're getting all of these folds here because the fabric right now does not stretch easily, which is very obvious to us because the stretch map tells us so. But it bends easily, which means that we're starting to get a lot of this kind of crumpled fabric effect, which can look pretty cool. And there are definitely materials that crumple easily, but don't necessarily stretch. I'm thinking of some type of artificial synthetic materials can kind of look like that. I have a particular raincoat that always looks like it's kind of crumpled. It's made of these synthetic fibers. It looks like it's always kind of crumpled. It does not stretch in any sort of way, but it bends very easily. So in this particular case, I also don't really want that. So let's also increase the stiffness here in relation to the bending. And as I'm doing that, you can actually see within our 3D viewport how we are actually getting rid of a lot of those folds that were there. So now we have something that is both resistant to bending and is also resistant to stretching. Of course, we want to play with these values until we find the sweet spot. Like now I have 5% stretching over the shoulders, but everywhere else it's practically zero, as you can see. So yeah, what we want is just to essentially find the sweet spot. What gives us a natural kind of drape and gives us essentially the amount of folds that we are looking for. So I think I want to perhaps reduce these values even more. Let's go for just a blanket 50-50 everywhere. These are not the final values, okay? These are just kind of values that I'm looking for to get more of a harder looking fabric. And of course, the presets have values that are perhaps better and that don't necessarily are the same for the shear and the bias on the bending and so on and so forth. We'll get values that are not exactly the same and that are perhaps a little bit more natural. But at least as a starting point for now, I think this is quite useful for us. This does start to look to me a little bit more like what I expect out of a coat. So I think I'm happy with this. There's some floatiness that we can see in different places here. There's the whole conversation of should we have tweaked these values before we spend so much time tweaking the fit? Because obviously this impacts the fit quite a lot, as you can see, which is a very, very interesting question. And the answer is probably yes. I probably should have tweaked this earlier on. But it's something that we can't actually address at this point here. I think I still am getting a fabric that is a little bit too stiff for my own taste. So let me reduce these values even more. And no one says that the resistance to bending needs to be the same as the resistance to stretching and vice versa there. So we can definitely have some of these values be a little bit different. But I really like how the back is kind of standing up right now. Like the back, fitting on the back, I really, really like it personally. I think the only issue that we're getting right now is just around the collar, as you can see. So we're starting to get some shapes here that are not all that great. So we perhaps want to address this before we go any further. But now that we have the sleeves that are connected there too, and everything seems to be relatively okay in terms of fit. We can definitely start to now address the fit a little bit better considering the type of material that we are looking for here, taking that into consideration. And we have a little bit less of that sagginess too uh, for the underarms there. So that's pretty good. It is definitely one of those things that you want to tweak sooner rather than later because of how much of an impact you can see that it has over the fit of the garment there. This has a major impact, you know. So if you spend all your time always tweaking your garment with the default Mars Designer settings, and only at the end do you play around with the material properties, you definitely will start to get some nasty surprises here, right? So this is one of those things that you want to address sooner rather than later to make sure that you are always working with a type of fabric that is very similar to what you expect it to be in the end. But the good thing now is that I have all of my basic garment is accounted for. I have the basic shape that I want for the what will be a coat. Of course, eventually this is a coat. We'll want to open the coat perhaps. Although my goal is to make a coat that is closed. So we will obviously add an opening to the coat at some point, but it won't change the actual fit because I want the coat to look like this in terms of its fit when the coat is closed. So it doesn't really matter to me that we don't have an opening that is built into the coat right now. But so we're still relatively early in creating this particular garment, so it's really a good time to address the kind of fitting issues that we have here. And it wouldn't be a bad idea either to make an actual choice as to what we want this particular garment to be made out of in the end. And I think the answer for me is leather. I think I like leather. I think I want to go for some type of leather over this particular coat. Quite happy with that as a material. So based upon that, of course, we could try to either continue to play with these properties until we get the exact folding that we expect it to have. Or we could also go ahead and choose one of the leather presets that we have. We don't have that many leathers, unfortunately, within Mars Designer. In fact, looking at the list right now, we have no leathers at all other than the trim full grain leather, but that's very, very stiff leather. That's not really a good one. So because we don't have any default actually for leathers in here, we can just create our own really. As I said, we're already kind of almost there really. The thing that you need to know about leather, and we do have a class on Algang Studio about material properties. So if you're interested to know in terms of material properties, how is leather different than, let's say, cotton or linen or something else? There is a class that we have that really delves deep into that and what is things like buckling points and buckling ratios and these sorts of things. But the important, perhaps the important part that we need just for the sake of this particular class is just to say that leather has a little bit of stretching to it, but as we said, that stretching really isn't all that high. But it is fairly bendy and it doesn't have much of what we call buckling points. So leather does not have a tendency to buckle, which are these kind of angular points, as if like angular breaks that seems to get created on fabric in different instances, on different types of fabrics. It's very obvious on some, and on other types of fabrics, it's almost not there at all. So buckling points, we have quite a lot of those. Or rather, we don't have any of those in the context of leather. We have very, very little of them. So, meaning that the properties that we have here are actually fairly close to what we expect leather to be at the end, in the sense that buckling here, all of that is set to 0, which is pretty good. I'm not sure whether leather needs to have buckling of exactly 0. My guess is there's probably a little bit of buckling in there, perhaps, but definitely those values, those buckling values should be very, very low here. So we'll keep those at 0 unless there's any reason to tweak how much buckling we have over our surface. We won't do it. We can keep just these values of 0. Now, of course, We had Mike Couchy over a few months ago, who was talking not about material properties in the context of cloth necessarily, but just shader creation. And he's a senior VFX artist, and he was talking about in the context of shader creation. If you ever have values for anything really that is either 0 or 1, you're probably making a mistake because there's really not a lot in real life that is at that extreme as far as any settings is concerned, really. So there's probably there something interesting for us to think about when it comes to having values of 0 here for buckling.